First of all, I want to thank each one of you for joining us. This webinar will run for 60 minutes, which includes 45 minutes of presentation, followed by a 15 minutes of Q&A session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A option on your webinar screen to post your questions, and we will respond to them during the Q&A session. Let's begin with webinar's objective: to gain a better understanding of the steps required to develop an effective fundraising strategy, learn how to implement your plan, to be more confident in how to help build and diversify income, to be better aware of the different elements to include in a fundraising strategy, to understand the difference between a fundraising strategy and a work plan. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available in the video section of Funds for NGOs premium website. And now allow me to introduce today's webinar trainer, Cheryl Hooper. Cheryl is an experienced development consultant and has led NGOs through different stages of development as a CEO for more than 20 years. She is an expert trainer and has provided training and capacity building by developing and strengthening the strategic direction, fundraising, staffing, governance, and sustainability for international NGOs. Cheryl has a master's degree in international cooperation and humanitarian aid and a BA honors degree in sociology. She has successfully developed numerous award-winning programs and secured funding from US Aid, UK Aid, Comic Relief, and several grant-making trusts and foundations with a combined value in excess of $5 million US. Now, I kindly request Cheryl to share her screen and lead the session.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I hope this all finds you well. Today's session, thank you for joining me today. Sometimes I think it's possible to confuse a fundraising strategy and a fundraising plan. And if you're the leader of your organisation and responsible for the overall fundraising strategy, the fundraising strategy is something that should look ahead and create a realistic picture and outlook regarding where your NGO should focus its efforts. So today, I want to help you understand how to develop an effective fundraising strategy that will help put in place a stronger foundation for growth. So bear with me, please. Okay, so I hope that by the end of this training, you will have a better understanding of the steps you need to take to develop an effective fundraising strategy. You should have more confidence in knowing what to do to diversify your income, and you should be better equipped to develop a strategy that is practical and that can be used and referred to as a guiding document and not something that is just going to sit on a shelf gathering dust. So let's begin by clarifying the difference between a fundraising strategy and a fundraising plan. So as I said earlier, when we talk about the fundraising strategy, think about a big picture approach. So in other words, the overall approach and long-term goals, the things that need to be done each year to achieve the long-term goal, the mix of funding sources you would need to develop, analysing your NGO's strengths, weaknesses, what opportunities might be worth pursuing, and the resources you would need to achieve the overarching goal. So the fundraising work plan is the execution of that strategy. So the explanation of what activities must take place, what tasks are required, what budget is allocated, and what the overall fundraising target is for that particular financial year. So here are the different stages that should be followed when developing a fundraising strategy. So beginning with the first stage, that must ensure that if you have the basic foundations and fundraising tools in place, for example, that you have a written case for support that can be adapted for different audiences, you have a website and database of your supporters, that there are financial controls, and you have an understanding and breakdown of what money will buy. So then also to analyse and review your expenditure, so to really understand how much things cost to operate your NGO and your separate projects, and then to set the fundraising target, a communication strategy in terms of how you're going to communicate to your donors, and then the work plan comes after that. So all donors want proof of good governance and financial transparency. So before you start looking at your fundraising strategy, you need to make sure that you have the appropriate financial policies and reports that you are able to report to donors, and that your accounts ideally are audited. You have impact monitoring systems in place, and that all your staff and volunteers have appropriate training, and that you're confident that in their ability to do the job. So basically, don't underestimate the importance of having good fundraising tools. So what I mean by that is, for example, a one-page overview of each of your projects. So this is a concise document that really summarises what your projects or each project is about. You would need an up-to-date website and social media presence, because the first thing people will do is to refer to your website if they want to donate. Impact stories and photos that you have gathered, personal stories and impact of your work, that you have proposal templates and budget templates. So for example, you have a clear template that you can use and adapt for different grant propositions, and that you've got ways to donate so that people are able to donate easily on your website when you start approaching them. So if you haven't written down your case for support, take time to have this in place before you begin any further work. So you may know why you're doing the work, but you may not actually have a written document in place. And so it's really important that you get this down before you develop your fundraising strategy. So when developing your case for support, make sure that your mission and vision is clear, so that you can explain who benefits from your support, and also why they need support. What is the problem that your NGO is actually trying to resolve? What changes will occur because of the work that you do? And then for you to back this up with evidence, such as stories, data, and documentation to prove that case for support. And then also, why is your NGO different? Why should people support you? So when you have this in place, you can take this generic case for support and then adapt it for different audiences, such as individual donors, faith groups, grant-making organisations, and so on. So the case for support should also contain clear costs that donors can relate to. so that they can see and understand the value of their donation regardless of how much they donate. So, for example, a small donation, $5 buys a vulnerable child lunch for a week, $10 buys a school uniform, and so on. Then you also need to break down the cost of employment, staff, rent, utilities, and other operational costs. And all of these should be in the case for support, which can then be referred to by a fundraiser when writing grant applications or making a presentation to other donors. So it's always good practice to review your projects when setting a budget and your fundraising target each year. So this gives a chance for you to check if your income is covering the necessary costs and including some things that perhaps if you looked at more thoroughly in terms of your projects, you may find that they're taking up staff time and resources, but not necessarily providing the impact. So it's at this stage that you might consider dropping some activities or putting less funding into them, especially if you're finding funding difficult. So the main reason for this exercise is that it's always beneficial to critically review your projects each year and assess their impact rather than just continuing with them year after year after year. So when you begin the process of budget planning, you need to separate the operational costs of running your NGO and the general operations and the costs associated with certain projects that may be running. So if you have a project that is operating, then you can take a proportion of the running costs of your NGO that supports that project and assign it to the cost of the project. So you may assign a certain percentage of running your management and your operations to that project cost in a grant application. So then take each project that your NGO is operating and work out the costs of implementing that project. So this should then include a proportion of your overheads. So typically it would be something in the region of, it could be anything from 7.5% to maybe 12.5% of your overheads. So this is important so that when grant applications are written, it should be possible to include some overhead costs in your grant applications. And if you receive funding from other sources, such as individuals or fundraising activities, if you know your operational costs, you can then take a percentage of that donation and allocate it to your core costs. So far, we have looked at the process of analysing the cost base or expenditure to operate your NGO and your various projects. After this, you need to look at analysing your income and breaking this down into definite income that you can rely on and other planned income that you feel you have a reasonable chance of securing. So this forms the basis of forecasting your fundraising target, which you can then compare to your budgeted expenditure costs. Now, if you see that there is a shortfall and that you find your fundraising forecasted income is unlikely to cover your expenditure, this is the time to go back and look at that portfolio matrix and decide if some activities can be combined to save money. Do they need the same level of resources? And do you need to operate them at all? So that you can find ways to reduce your expenditure budget. And after this, you should be in a position to finalise your operating budget and your fundraising target. So all fundraising strategies should aim to develop a range of revenue streams. So here, these are a typical example of the revenue streams that many NGOs have developed, and so that you can think about which income streams your NGO might develop as part of a long-term strategy. So the types of questions that you need to consider when you start developing your strategy is, how much income might we realistically make? So which income streams are the most profitable? So where are you going to put your efforts in? How much income do you think you might get from grants? How much income can you forecast to come in from new grant opportunities? What income can we realistically plan for each income stream? And is there any definite income that we can rely upon? For example, grants that are coming in from a multi-year grant that you may have been awarded, or regular individual donations. And, what should be our fundraising areas priorities? So when you've asked the questions that you should consider, it's time to narrow things down and analyse which revenue streams can you develop. When do you need to get different revenue streams in place? And what needs to be done to achieve this? And of course, who will lead? So these are general principles that should form the basis of a practical and realistic fundraising strategy. So you will see that the various actions are a higher level type of activity that can be built into the fundraising strategy and help you as a manager to have them in a work plan that can be developed in conjunction with your fundraiser. So these are the general higher level principles that you can look at for a fundraising strategy, and then you would narrow those down into a fundraising work plan. So it's important to include ways to maximise opportunities for partnering with other organisations or individuals, and make sure that you include this where in your fundraising strategy, because if you leave this out, then it's likely that it will be forgotten. But the more you expand your networks, the more opportunities will come to you. So part of your fundraising strategy should also not necessarily be purely about getting income in. It needs to be wider than that in terms of building relationships, bigger picture in terms of trying to leverage other opportunities that might come to you. So when developing the higher level fundraising strategy, these headings can be used as a guide to follow. And if you carry out the work at the beginning regarding the operational and the project costs and the projected income analysis, you can then begin to develop the detail behind the strategy. So the very first thing, of course, is the purpose of the strategy. So it's not just about getting income in. What is the strategy? So the strategy in this case is to diversify your funding and to create stable revenue streams. Then after that, you have your individual fundraising targets against those revenue streams that you have identified. Then your approach. So that approach would be things like leveraging partnerships, having a diverse case for support according to the different audiences, and so on. So this is just an example of what a funding strategy might look like, beginning with 3 objectives that have been identified. So the first one is diversifying funding, strengthening relationships with donors, and the third one, building internal capacity. And so you will see all of those things are higher level objectives. And in this example, I've given a target of £50,000. So after this, you can see how this income is intended to be achieved. You'll see that there's a time frame behind that, exactly what it covers, what element of that cost covers, and then the responsibility of who leads. But overall responsibility should be the director or the CEO for ensuring that this is followed, with individual activities delegated to your fundraiser or whoever is your appropriate member of staff. So then, just to follow and show a bit more detail, here's the breakdown behind other revenue streams and how this could be achieved. So you will see that different revenue streams have been allocated certain amounts depending on what in this case was felt to be realistic, and then there's some notes behind that in terms of where and how you might approach that. And then the strategy goes into more detail, broken down by quarter. That takes you as to what needs to be done, who would be responsible, and what are the key performance indicators that you could use to measure the progress of the strategy. And then in the funding strategy, you should also, there should be other things that need to be done to ensure that the fundraising strategy and target is achieved. So these are other wider things that need to be in place. So making sure that you've got the right accounting software, your communication strategy, what skills you might need within your staff team, how you would inform donors of the work that you're doing through annual reviews, annual reports, and so on. So whilst the funding strategy might be to increase, for example, the number of individual donors who support your NGO, it's important that the work plan behind that strategy shows not only the tasks that need to be undertaken to achieve this, but also how donors would be supported and nurtured so they stayed loyal. So if part of that fundraising strategy is to increase donor engagement and to build loyalty, then these are the sorts of things that you would have in your fundraising strategy, and behind that in the work plan would be the activities that you need to do to achieve that. And another important aspect that should be part of any fundraising strategy is the monitoring and evaluation of that strategy, and the monitoring and evaluation of the fundraising to assess how effective the strategy is, how effective is the work plan, and if anything needs to be changed or adapted. So if you put in benchmarks that you can monitor, then this can also form the basis of work reviews with your fundraiser and other members of your team. So you can then start looking at these as benchmarks when you start doing performance reviews with your fundraising, whoever's doing your fundraising. And then finally, it's important to always manage risk and put in place in the fundraising strategy mitigations and solutions if things don't go to plan. And once again, you need to review this regularly by the director or the CEO and your management committee so that you can see if your income isn't coming in as quickly as you had planned, or if certain strategies aren't working. It should be possible to develop new strategies before things escalate. So when you're managing a fundraiser, if you develop smart objectives, and these are developed in collaboration with that member of staff or your designated volunteer, they should be more willing to take ownership for the fundraising target and the strategies, rather than having something that is imposed upon them. So once the strategy is developed, it will be time to develop the individual work plan and targets together. So this is an example of a smart objective for a fundraiser, which could be used to measure their progress and manage the individual. So you'll see, just as a random example, recruit and form one local fundraising support group within 6 months, and you've got a target there of $5,000. So you can see in the work plan, this is a specific target that they need to be working towards. It's something that as a manager you can track and measure progress, because you can see, have they formed a group? How much money is being raised by that group? And it's realistic, because if you agree that with your fundraiser, it would be based on something that they thought would be realistic. If you decided on 10 groups, it would be unrealistic and difficult to achieve. And then, of course, it's time bound, because you've put a 6-month period there which you can review. So moving to implementation of your strategy, make sure that everyone in your NGO is aware of the income target and the importance of fundraising, but also the importance of everybody in your team taking responsibility for this and not just leaving it to the fundraiser to shoulder the burden. There are many times where other members of staff who are not fundraisers also meet potential donors or come across opportunities that could be explored. So encourage your team to adopt a fundraising culture, because remember, if there are no funds, there are no programs. So every member of your team really should be aware of what your fundraising target is for the year, what their individual responsibility is, and that they are all working together to support that fundraiser or whoever is doing that fundraising to achieve the target. So that really just brings me to the end of this session. I hope it's been useful for you. There's a lot to cover in a short space of time, but I'm very happy to take questions now, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you again, and I hope that this will help you with any future fundraising planning and strategy, and I'm happy to take questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your insightful presentation. Participants, please send in your questions so that we can take in this webinar. The first question is, as a new NGO, how does one, my major concern is questions around experience, how you implemented similar projects.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure of the question. Is it is it about fundraising experience?
Yes,
It's about fundraising
yes.
experience. Could you just interpret it again for me, Anu?
It is like as a new NGO, my major concern is around experience, fundraising experience, how you implement similar projects. How does one go around that? Or we can take next question if this sounds
No,
unclear.
let me just try and answer that.
Sure, sure.
I think I think the first thing is very difficult, but um, a lot of fundraising does come from experience. Some of it can be learnt, and there are courses available and training available to learn certain skills and techniques in fundraising, because it is a skillful job. Um, but I think if you are a small NGO, and you are quite often, small NGOs are led by founders, or they're formed, they're led by founders, uh, and so there is a passion there and a real understanding of the need for the work, and a real understanding of wanting to help and make improvements in the communities where you operate. So if you are a founder-led NGO and you're small and you don't really have the experience, I think what you need to really think about is that even if you don't have the experience, you know your communities, you know what your community needs, you know the changes that can be made in that community, and you know the reality of that community. So I would start from that place, I would start from a place of real understanding of your communities, and try and write down your case for support as a starting point. So try and get your case support. I've got it in the slides here and other training that I've done, but what is the problem you are trying to address? Why is it needed? What changes do you want to make, and why? Who are your beneficiaries? How many people are you supporting? And try and write those things down, because that will be the beginning of your case for support. And the more you talk about it and the more you write about it, the more you will gain experience and improve your skills. So I would say start with that, and then look at other training that might help you build your skills slowly in that way. So I hope that will help you.
Thank you for your input, Cheryl. The next question is, for a new NGO with limited visibility, what's the most practical way to start approaching potential donors?
Yeah, good point. I think it's a really good point. So what I would say is that one technique that can work if you haven't got it is to, if you don't have a management committee or a governing board who have got contacts, then form what I would call an advisory board. So if your NGO is working in a particular field, it might be health, or it might be education, for example, or if it's an advocacy NGO, it might be to do with governance and things like that. So gather a number of people together, research people that you think in your communities who are really well respected. They might be business owners, they might be doctors, they might be teachers, they might have positions of authority, and make a direct approach to them and ask them if they would be willing to be part of an advisory board for your NGO. And quite often, you'll be surprised if you ask people, they will they will respond positively, especially if you say that there isn't a huge time commitment for them, but their input would really make a difference. Now that once you've got that advisory board, then you can start looking at tapping into their networks and seeing who do they know that you might be able to go and present the work of your NGO to. So, that would be the way in. And if you have any contacts with a well-known person, and you can try and get a patron behind you, that would really help you as well. So I would start like that to try and build your reputation in that way.
Thank you for your input, Cheryl. The next question is, how important is it for small NGOs to invest in branding before starting fundraising?
I don't think you need to invest in branding, but I do think you do need to have some form of branding, in the sense that you need to have a website. If you have a simple Facebook page to complement that website, that would be good as well. I think you need to be clear on your mission and your name and what it stands for. So, to have a strap line that explains who you are, your NGO name, and then what you do or what you stand for. So those things all contribute to branding, but you don't have to invest heavily in that. There are so many free resources on the internet where you can create your own branding. If you use Canva, so there's a website called Canva. It's Canva, and I think it's canva.com. If you go on there, you can register as a free user. So there is a paid facility and there is a free facility. You can go in there and they have templates. They have templates for all sorts of things: annual reports, logos, I don't know, budgets, all sorts of things that you can use and you can adapt. And they're very user friendly. So if I were you, I would start with something like that and make sure that it's consistent. So once you have decided on what colours you're going to use and how you're going to describe yourself, you just continue to use that. But I would definitely encourage you to have a look at Canva and see if you can start there first. Don't spend any money on it, not yet.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your input. The next question is, could you recommend a few free or low-cost tools to help manage fundraising activities effectively?
Yeah. So as I said, I think Canva is one to look at. So what you will get there is all sorts of very simple and really, really good graphics that you can use. And you can take those graphics and put them onto a simple document. They have fundraising templates, they have flyers, leaflets, all sorts of things where there's a ready-made template and you can change the colors, you can change the font, you can change the text, you can drop in photos, all sorts of things like that. So I would say that is a good graphics fundraising tool. And I use it a lot, and I don't think you actually need much more than that. I think that the other things for fundraising, if you're talking to individuals or groups, you can do all of this stuff on Word really simply. So you can produce a fundraising toolkit, if you like, to give to people who want to fundraise on behalf of your NGO. So in that toolkit, you would have your case for support, why about your NGO, why you're working, who you're supporting, the difference it makes. You would give them fundraising ideas. So there would be a list of different ideas and how they might go about doing them. So it might be something really simple, like a coffee morning or a dinner party or a dress down day at work. It could be anything, a whole range of different fundraising ideas. And you could supply them with information and things like flyers that you can make on Canva, and you put that all together in a kit, and then when you're presenting to people who want to fundraise, you can give that to them. So I think you could do pretty much anything for fundraising using just a simple Word document and Canva as a starting point.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your input. The next question is, what metrics are crucial for evaluating fundraising strategy success?
What matrix?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the thing to do there is to look at your put some indicators in place. So what you want is to agree, when you've got your fundraising strategy, to think about some key performance indicators or benchmarks, so, and which would also be a time bound. So for example, if your higher level strategy was to diversify your income and improve the income, the revenue streams of grants, individual donors, and community fundraising. And say you'd put in a target of raising a certain amount by grants, a certain amount by individual donors, a certain amount by community work. What you would do there is you would put in the amount that you're expecting within each quarter and annually, and then who would be doing it and the strategies behind that. So each quarter you would review that. So you would look at your grants, you would look at your individual donations, you would look at your community fundraising and assess how much has come in on each level and where is that in line with your overall fundraising strategy. So what you might find is you end up having an Excel spreadsheet and it will show the income that has come in. So at the end, you will have your fundraising target of £50,000, okay? And in quarter one, against each of those revenue streams, you will be able to put a percentage. So you might find 10% has come in from grants. So the grant target has achieved 10% of its target in quarter one. The individual target has received 20% in quarter one, and the community fundraising target has raised 50% in quarter one. And then in quarter two, so each quarter you are analysing the percentage of income that is coming in against each income stream to the end of the year. So what happens is by the time you get to quarter four, okay, by that time you are very near to the end of your year. So at that time, your annual target is £50,000. In quarter four, you will begin to start looking at it and thinking, we've got £38,000 in, X amount from grants, X amount from individuals, X amount from community, 38,000. So basically, you can then see we've got 3 months to bring in £12,000 or dollars or whatever. So then you can look at your strategy, see where most of the income is coming in, and then really change your strategy to try and make sure that you achieve that target. It's quite complicated to explain verbally. It's probably easier if I did it in a graphic of some kind, but I will try and look at that and think about doing that in a future training. But I hope I've given you some idea there.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your input. The next question is, how can you best manage multiple streams of grants in the same single period?
So what you do there is you have again, the strategy, the way to do this is to break it down into manageable chunks. So if you assign a grant, say you say, right, we need to achieve $50,000 in grants, okay? And you think $50,000 is a lot. It sounds too big. It sounds like a mountain. We don't know how to, we're not sure. So the thing to do is to break that down, okay? So you can break that target down. So you can say, we're going to achieve $15,000 out of that 50,000 with small grant applications between $2,000 and $5,000. So then you would have to work out how many grant applications do we need to send out, small grant applications, to achieve that 15,000. Then you can say, okay, we then need to send out X number of grant applications for amounts between $5,000 and $10,000 to achieve another 15. So what you're doing is you're breaking that target down, and you need to form a grant pipeline. So you do your research, you find out 50, maybe 100 trusts or foundations or something that you want to apply to, and then you break those trusts down into X number will be applied to for small grants, X number for medium grants, and then X for large grants. And that is your pipeline of activity, and that is how you manage multiple grants and how you manage fundraising in that way.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your input. Can we take one more question?
Yeah, sure.
All right. How can collaboration with other NGOs strengthen a small organization's fundraising strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So if you are a small NGO, say you're an implementing NGO, what you can do is if you collaborate with another NGO that is maybe slightly bigger than you, they might be able to subgrant you. So if you form a partnership or an understanding with other NGOs doing similar work, if they secure a big grant, they may not be able to deliver on the ground because they don't have enough resources. But if they were to work with a smaller NGO and subgrant, then you would be able to do the work for them and report into that NGO as a partner. So that's one way you could do it. Another way is that a grant opportunity comes along and you put in a grant as a joint application. So you develop that and it's strength in numbers. But what you don't want is you want to find partners who complement and strengthen your operations and what you're doing. So you don't necessarily want like for like where you're just doing the same work in the same communities. You might be bringing in, for example, say you're a health NGO and you see a grant opportunity, but you think that the project might benefit from advocacy, and that's where you could work with another NGO who specialises in advocacy, and you bring them in to work on the advocacy side of a health programme. And that's how you would collaborate, and that's how you would add value, by bringing the skills and the experience of NGOs together to strengthen a grant application.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your input. Participants, due to time limitations, we cannot cover all the questions here. As now we have reached the end of the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for your active participation. Please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for today's session. Your input is crucial in helping us to improve. If you have any questions, suggestions, feel free to contact us at support@fundsforngos.org. The feedback form will appear on your screen in a moment. Once again, thank you, Cheryl, and to all the participants. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.